In January of 2024,
in the year, Elon Musk filed with the US Postal Service an application to establish his own in the state of Texas. The city's Starbase, the place where SpaceX rockets are built, will now become a full-fledged city of the future. Why did the richest man on the planet choose Texas? Now, this is perhaps a question for economists, but we as historians will tell you in the next few minutes that even Napoleon once chose Texas. And we'll also explain why Texas is called the Lone Star State, where do all the Vietnamese come from there, and which 6 countries claimed his territory. Make yourself comfortable, friends. Our story begins in 5027. Te studiam. In the year when the Spanish explorer Alonso de Pineda was searching for a way to Asia, he stumbled upon the coast of Texas and put it on the map. But as we already mentioned in the video about colonization, life is not a game. And it's not like there was a rush in Europe of the necessity to populate the New World. Rather the opposite, explorers, traders and conquistadors openly and blatantly lied about the wealth of the continent to knock out some funding in Europe. So the old world residents returned to Texas.
Even after
160
years.
Moreover, these were not Spaniards, but unexpectedly French. René Robert Cavelier de la Salle started the story more like a joke. First Louis XIV will advise the self-sufficient one. Taram named everything. The Mississippi River Valley is French territory. That is almost 4,000 kilometers long. And God knows how wide, considering even a proper map of the river did not exist back then. Here began the second part of the laughter of the panorama as René decided to eliminate the problem with the cards. And hence accordingly to find the mouth of the Mississippi, to at least understand what is being annexed to France. The French expedition landed in the New World in 1685, almost immediately founding the first European settlement in Texas. Fort St. Louis, with 5 houses, was located southeast of modern-day San Antonio, and 644 kilometers from the mouth Mississippi. The French, like Columbus before them, miscalculated, trusted faulty maps, and landed who knows how. In the end, unexpectedly even for themselves, they became the first inhabitants of Texas. This marks the beginning of the third round of the comedy show. After all, Spanish Florida and New Spain were not far away. The colonies, accurate, between which the French were squeezed. They did not specifically plan to settle in Texas and ended up there, but it was hard for the Spaniards to prove it. King Charles II Monteaza Cambashta was so upset that he named the Fort St. Louis,
which were thrust into the heart of
The problem was that the Spaniards didn't have a clue about Texas geography, and it took them 4 years just to find the French settlement. Year after which, in 1689, Fort St. Louis ceased to exist. Along the way, with a funny irony, the Spaniards realized that during the search they updated the Texas maps quite well. We learned a lot about the area and got acquainted with the local tribes. Why not in fact add a Spanish text to the already existing Spanish Florida? Texas. That's what was done, and already in 1691 General Domingo Turco Serran de los Rios became the first governor of Texas. From that moment on, the 1.5 centuries history of the colony as part of the empire began. And to avoid confusion with the French, the conquistadors quickly organized infrastructure. In 1718, modern San Antonio was founded. A bit later, Robb, Liney, Rio Grande, and so on. But there was no peace on the EA continent. It was. Over the course of 51 years, France and Spain managed to overtake 3 times all the territory in the New World. The apogee of which was the 7 Years' War, which many historians call the Zero World War. Worldwide, countries from all over the world clashed on all continents, with various objectives, including getting caught in the crossfire. Which by the terms of the Peace of Paris in 1762 was reluctantly ceded to Spain. France lost almost all his colonies, but Napoleon will come a bit later and temporarily fix the situation. He also suddenly played an important role in the history of Texas, because just 15 years after his return from St. Petersburg, news appeared on the American continent. In 1776, the USA declared independence. And of course, people immediately started eyeing the Spanish possessions. There was a rigmarole, during which Texas returned to France and was sold to the USA, along with Louisiana, a matter of contention. And all sorts of things happened there. Relatively finished the mess. So the Adams Agreement, according to which Spain and the US were still returning Texas. But in exchange for Florida. It was already in 1890. Napoleon had 2 years left to live. And by that time, both the emperor's return and his shameful defeat had faded. Napoleon was in exile on the island of St. Helena, but he was still weaving devious plans. Plans. Only this time it's not about conquering Europe. Napoleon wanted to try his luck in the New World, and his destination was to be Texas. After all, his older brother Joseph had already rested here. Napoleon had made him the king of Spain in his time. Of course, after the fall of the Bonaparte regime, the throne also fell. However, Joseph turned out to be smarter and managed to escape to the USA with the honor of the army and 50 million francs just before the overthrow. Joseph Bonaparte invested 100,000 of them in young Spaniard Francisco Mino, who was supposed to develop a cunning evacuation plan. Evacuation of Napoleon from exile in but to make a noise, as the first part of the plans was the conquest of Spanish colonies in the New World. Unfortunately,
happiness, it's a
the
jeep.
first stage was a pass. The Spaniards were ready for the Seigneur Bonaparte's rebellion, publicly hanged everyone, and it never came to the point of Napoleon's evacuation. However, they tried to pull it off at least 5 more times. Submarines, smugglers, and even Brazilians were involved at different stages of the case. After all, Napoleon was very popular in South America for his help in fighting against the USSR. And in short, cancer ruined all plans and it didn't work out to visit Napoleon in Texas, but his cause continued to live and already in 18 Daesh. Ishati imido twait. In 1821, Mexico took its independence from Spain. Along with it, Texas, which joined a new country for itself without a single shot. Against the backdrop of the mastodons of that time, Mexico was incredibly poor. To survive, the young state allowed to populate the territories and claim its own. Literally anyone interested was expected to defend themselves from the natives and quietly settle the country. That's what happened, but with nuances. The overwhelming majority of immigrants came from the US with their own rules and customs. So much so that Texas unilaterally refused the prohibition of cancer, for Americans to feel as if they were at home. And when Mexico realized that their state had turned into a richer branch of the USA, it was already too late. In 1832, Americans were forbidden to move to America. And of course, nothing good came out of it. Just 4 years later, Texas began the War for Independence. It lasted until 1836 and ended with a complete victory. Texas, mostly because of the hopelessly outdated Mexican guns. US support, oddly enough, wasn't that big. And the new Texas Republic. One could say the Republic achieved everything on its own. Almost all major states recognized its independence. Europe. And the population of the young country was divided. Most initially saw themselves as part of the United States, but the voices of those who planned to develop Tejana were loudly heard. You in a huge state from ocean to ocean. You probably know how it all ended. On February 28, 1845, the US Congress passed a bill on the annexation of Texas. Not to say forcibly. Texas, first of all, was constantly under attack from Mexico, who wished to reclaim it. Secondly, the state heavily indebted itself to maintain an army and fend it off. Well, thirdly, Texas is promised an increase in its territory by the US. At whose expense, you ask? Please answer this question.
Currently, Mexico's
Which
actions
was still considered their settlement. And immediately after its annexation, it found itself at war with the USA, which ended with a loss of 5 years. 55% of its territory. We're talking about virtually all of the southwest of modern United States with California, Hollywood, and Manhattan. Their project. Then the US will war with Mexico once more, with a rather predictable result, and Texas will find itself at the center of a new crisis in just a few years. Ian says the Civil War will begin in 1861, in which, contrary to popular belief, Texas will not be central, quite the opposite, hence the nickname Backdoor of Confidence. It wasn't easy for the state. The Confederates used the Texas Sea for cotton trade with Europe, and the state itself witnessed perhaps the last significant battle of the Civil War, mainly limited to sending people to the front and strong support of the Confederation. Interestingly, northern generals of that era often accused Texas of starting the Civil War, but not for the state's role in it. Ulysses Grant and other heroes often referred to the Civil War as divine punishment for the early Mexican War, and believed that God punished the USA in such a cruel way for their antics in the whole. Well, Texas has remained more or less within the same borders to this day, and it is still the only US state that joined the Union, will be an independent state, statehood. Hence, Texas is still referred to as the Lone Star State, which is displayed on the Texas flag as a reminder of the struggle for independence from Mexico and single combat. In the spirit of unity, many interesting things happened over the years in the state, not just Elon Musk. For example, a quarter of all Vietnamese Americans live in Texas. Origin? In Houston, about 5% are Vietnamese. And of course, the roots go back to the times of the Vietnamese era. towards the end of the war, when the USA retreated from the border, states, followed by Union troops and just people who liked America more. Officially, 3 waves were approved. This is refugees who mainly settled in California, Florida, and Texas, as the climate of these states was closer to, in Texas specifically, Vietnamese is the most popular language after English and Spanish, despite the fact that its speakers no longer consider themselves Vietnamese for a long time. 6 countries have claimed Texas in its history: France, Spain, Mexico, the Republic of Texas, the Confederacy, and finally, the USA. The advantageous geography, abundant natural resources, and local mentality have been attracting significant human and financial capitals to the state for years. On this high note, we might as well conclude, and we are waiting for your review in the comments about whether you liked the section and about which state or region you would like to hear about in the next video. See you soon, friends! Friends, we have a small announcement. From this moment on, we're actively managing our Telegram channel, where we'll be publish a lot of interesting historical chatter, announce videos, and together with you,
make your choice.
For them topics, comments there are open. Everyone can interact with the authors of a different story. Link to the channel in the pinned comment. We'll be happy to see